After my wife passed away, I hired a contractor to remodel her former law office. I was at church when he called and said, "Mr. Gideon, you need to come see what we discovered. But please don't come alone. Bring your sons with you." When I arrived, there was a hidden room behind one of the walls. I was completely stunned by what I saw inside. Before I reveal what was in that room, please subscribe to the channel, like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. 10 months after Eleanor died, I finally gathered the courage to handle her office. It was nothing grand, just a converted garage behind our house on Elm Street in Madison, Wisconsin, about 12 feet by 16. For 25 years, she had practiced estate law there, helping elderly clients protect their life savings. The cruel irony of that would strike me later. I had avoided the place since her funeral. Every time I walked past it, I still pictured her through the window, reading glasses perched on her nose, leaning over her desk, surrounded by case files. But she was gone, and Emily, my granddaughter, needed a cozy reading nook more than I needed a memorial to my grief. That's what I told myself when I hired Thomas Harper. Thomas had worked for us before, always honest and dependable. When he arrived that Tuesday in early October, the air already carried the crisp edge of fall. Leaves were starting to turn on the maple tree that shaded Eleanor's office. I told him to just clear everything out. Hand him the key. Take down the shelves. Update the wiring. Add better lighting. My son's daughter loves books. Thomas nodded and said Eleanor would have loved that idea. I went back inside the house. I couldn't bear to watch him dismantle her world. Her law books, her diplomas, the coffee mug she never quite cleaned, the legal pads covered in her neat handwriting, the small bottle of perfume by the window. 3 hours later, my phone rang. "Mr. Gideon." Thomas sounded tense. "I need you to come out here." My stomach dropped. "What happened? Just come see." He was standing by the east wall bookcase, the custom one Eleanor had insisted on back in 2003. He had pulled it forward about 18 inches. It moved too easily. He explained. Then I found this. Behind it was a small wall safe, brushed steel with a digital keypad. "I didn't even know it existed," I whispered. "She hid it perfectly," Thomas replied. "There are hidden tracks, so the shelf slides if you know the trick." My hands trembled. "Can you give me a moment?" He nodded. Eleanor was brilliant. If she hid something, there was always a good reason. I stood alone in the office that still carried the faint trace of her perfume. Dust danced in the sunlight. Outside, leaves rustled gently, somewhere down the street. A leaf blower hummed. The keypad glowed soft blue. Eleanor had never mentioned a safe, but after 47 years together, I knew her patterns. Her birthday, our anniversary, 718914. Nothing. I tried again. Slower this time. The safe clicked open. My heart raced. Inside was a USB drive, a sealed manila envelope, and a thin stack of papers with highlighted names. People I recognized from around town. But the envelope stopped me cold. My name written in Eleanor's handwriting, to Benjamin. Read alone first. The tape was aged and yellowed. My hands shook so much I had to set it on her desk to open it. Inside were 4 pages of her precise script, the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards, thank you notes, and shopping lists. I couldn't read it standing up. I sank into her leather chair and unfolded the pages. The first line took my breath away. "My dearest Benjamin, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you've found what I've hidden for 4 years. 4 years. She had carried this secret while cancer slowly took her life. I needed to read this alone. I asked Thomas Harper to head home for the day. He nodded, understanding clear on his weathered face, and quietly closed the door behind him. I was alone with my late wife's final words. The office had grown dimmer while I stood frozen at the safe. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across Eleanor's desk. I sat in her favorite chair, the one she spent countless evenings in, reviewing cases and making careful notes. The letter felt heavy in my hands, written on the quality stationery she always reserved for important things. I smoothed it out and forced myself to continue. My dearest Benjamin, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found what I've hidden for 4 years. Nathan is not the man we believed him to be. My chest tightened painfully. I read the line again. Nathan is not the man we believed him to be. Our older son, the successful one, the one I had been so proud of for 46 years. 4 years ago, Mrs. Margaret Wilson came to my office. She had lost her entire retirement savings, $420,000. The investment advisor who stole it was our son. The words blurred before my eyes. I blinked hard and kept reading. I investigated. Benjamin. I had to be certain. There are 7 victims. 7 elderly clients who trusted someone calling himself Alexander Gideon. $2.1 million stolen over 12 years. Alexander, our younger son. The quiet one who struggled, who filed bankruptcy 8 years ago, whose wife left him, who teaches middle school history and barely makes ends meet. Eleanor was telling me Nathan had used his brother's identity. The worst part, Nathan used Alexander's identity. Bank accounts, forged signatures, everything in Alexander's name. If this ever comes to light, Alexander will be arrested first. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I set the letter down and tried to breathe. This couldn't be real. Nathan lived in a beautiful home in Greenwich, Connecticut, drove a Porsche, took his family to the Caribbean every winter. I had always thought he was brilliant, driven, reliable. Alexander, meanwhile, had always seemed fragile, reserved, disappointing if I'm completely honest. When he lost everything and Claire left with their daughter, I had wondered what poor choices he had made. I picked the letter up again. I spent nearly 3 years gathering evidence. I couldn't go to the police. Nathan's framing was too thorough. Alexander would be charged before anyone looked deeper. I needed proof no one could dispute. The USB drive contains everything: money trails, bank records, and a recording of Nathan confessing. I got him to admit it. I told him I was dying and only wanted the truth before I went. He believed I would take his secret to my grave. A recording. Eleanor had recorded our son admitting he had ruined his brother's life. I had planned to expose him after your retirement celebration. I wanted you to have one final joyful family memory before everything fell apart. But the cancer spread faster than I expected. The choice is yours now. Benjamin, protect Alexander. He is innocent. He has always been the better son, and we never truly saw it. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't resolve this before I left you. Eleanor. Her signature wavered at the bottom. She must have written this near the very end, when even holding a pen caused pain. I set the letter down, trembling violently. The son I had bragged about, praised, admired for decades, was a predator who targeted vulnerable elderly people like Mrs. Wilson. And the son I had quietly judged, felt ashamed of, had been deliberately framed for nearly a decade. 8 years of ruin, the divorce, the debt, the quiet shame in Alexander's voice whenever money was mentioned. None of it had been his fault. Eleanor had known for 4 years while cancer consumed her. While I spoke proudly of Nathan and worried about Alexander, she had simply smiled and held my hand. 47 years married, and I had been blind the entire time. The USB drive sat beside the letter, labeled in her careful handwriting, "Insurance do not lose. The truth. The proof that would destroy one son and save the other." I had to see it for myself. The USB drive rested on the desk, labeled in Eleanor's neat handwriting, "Insurance do not lose." My hands still shook as I plugged it into the laptop Thomas had left behind. Outside, the streetlights had come on. Elm Street looked peaceful through the window. Neighbors walking their dogs. Children riding bikes home before dinner. Ordinary life continuing while my entire world crumbled inside this dimly lit office, illuminated only by the laptop screen. The drive opened to reveal 2 folders, victims and recordings. I clicked victims first. 7 subfolders appeared, each meticulously named and dated. Even in my shock, I recognized Eleanor's meticulous legal precision. I opened the first 01, Margaret Wilson. A photograph appeared of an elderly woman with soft white hair and kind eyes, wearing a pale blue sweater. Someone's grandmother. Someone who had trusted our family. Below the photo was the detailed summary. Margaret Ann Wilson, age 84, widowed 2010, 1 adult daughter deceased. Primary caregiver to grandson. Age 17. Retired nurse. Total stolen $420,000 over 20 months. Method investment account opened under the name Alexander Gideon. Social Security number matched Alexander's. All signatures expertly forged. Client believed she was working with Eleanor Gideon's younger son. Money trail funds routed through shell companies before landing in Nathan Gideon's personal accounts. I stared at the screen in horror. $420,000. A lifetime of careful saving. Money meant to support a grieving grandson after tragedy. And Nathan had taken it, using his brother's name, ensuring Alexander would take the blame. There were 6 more folders, 6 more faces, 6 more devastated lives. I clicked recordings. 9 audio files appeared. My cursor hovered over the first October 8, 2023. Confrontation Nathan, 4 months before Eleanor passed. I clicked play. Eleanor's voice filled the quiet room. Steady at first, then Nathan's polished, confident tone. The voice I had admired for years. Eleanor named Margaret Wilson. Nathan deflected smoothly. Eleanor pressed harder. Then his tone shifted, grew colder. He mentioned Alexander's name on every document, that Alexander would be arrested first, that the elderly had accumulated more than they needed, that Alexander was weak, always had been, and that he, Nathan, had won. Then Eleanor began to cry softly. Then the sound of a door slamming. I stopped the recording, barely able to move the mouse. Nathan's laugh lingered in the silent room. Cold, proud, cruel. I won. Mom, I won. That voice belonged to my son, the son I had boasted about, the son I believed was strong and accomplished. But what I heard wasn't strength. It was corruption, pride in destroying his own brother, satisfaction in stealing from vulnerable people, joy in breaking his dying mother's heart. I could hear Eleanor crying on the recording. She had been dying, yet spent her final months building a case to protect Alexander from the trap Nathan had constructed. 8 more recordings waited. 7 more victims. I couldn't listen yet. I needed to re-examine everything I thought I knew about my younger son. The bankruptcy, the divorce, the shame in his eyes whenever finances came up, the way his life never seemed to recover. It hadn't been failure. It had been sabotage. Eleanor was right. Alexander had always been the better son, and I had been blind to it for far too long. I spent the next 4 days reviewing every file, every document, every second of those recordings. With each piece of evidence, Alexander's struggles, his quiet pain, came into heartbreaking focus under a new and devastating light. The first day, I couldn't stop thinking about the divorce. 4 years earlier, Claire had left him. I remembered the phone call, Alexander's voice low and resigned as he said, "She thinks I'm financially reckless, Dad, that my credit is ruined and I'm holding her back." We had believed it. I had believed it. I had even told Eleanor that Alexander had never been responsible with money, that his troubles were self-inflicted. Now I knew the truth. Nathan's fraudulent accounts, all opened under Alexander's name, had destroyed his credit. The bankruptcy that followed wasn't Alexander's failure. It was Nathan's carefully laid trap while he grew wealthy on stolen funds. We had blamed Alexander. Nathan never corrected us. On the second morning, I did something I should have done years ago. I pulled Alexander's credit report using access from an old joint account we still shared. The score hit me like a punch, 465. A number that meant no decent apartment, no loans, no escape. The report listed accounts Alexander never opened. Investment firms registered between 2013 and 2020, all delinquent. One business registration read, Alexander Gideon, Principal, Gideon Wealth Management. Alexander had never worked in finance. He was teaching history to 8th graders while Nathan used his identity to create shell companies. Every setback carried Nathan's fingerprints. That night, memories rearranged themselves into a horrifying pattern. Alexander earned $58,000 a year. Every background check flagged his ruined credit, costing him better teaching positions. In 2021, when Emily needed emergency surgery, Alexander couldn't qualify for a loan. I remembered the online fundraiser, how embarrassed I had felt for him. Now I saw it for what it was, survival against an invisible enemy. He lived in a small one-bedroom apartment, drove a 17-year-old Toyota, never took vacations, never complained. He kept teaching, kept showing up for his daughter. Alexander wasn't failing. He was enduring. Meanwhile, Nathan's life shone brightly online. I searched his name and felt physically ill. His Greenwich home was valued at $2.8 million. His LinkedIn profile listed him as founder and managing director of a firm with no verifiable clients. Luxury SUV in the driveway, tailored clothing, private club memberships, all funded by $2.1 million stolen from elderly people who trusted him. On the fourth day, I drove to Mrs. Margaret Wilson's modest home, a small brick ranch with flower boxes in the windows. She answered cautiously until I introduced myself. Then her face softened with sympathy for Eleanor. When I mentioned the lost money, tears filled her eyes. $420,000. My husband's life insurance and our savings. I was keeping it for my grandson's college. I told her the files showed Alexander's name. She shook her head firmly. Impossible. Alexander tutored my grandson in history for free last year. That young man has a gentle heart. When I mentioned Nathan, she grew quiet. The charming one. Always so polished. I trusted him. But deep down I knew something felt off. I promised her I would make this right. Sitting in my car afterward, two truths settled deep in my soul. Alexander had been systematically destroyed by his own brother, and I had been blind for 47 years. Eleanor had seen it. She had spent her final years fighting for Alexander while I remained oblivious. Now she had left me irrefutable proof. Reporting this to local police wasn't straightforward. Nathan had engineered the fraud too cleverly. If I mishandled it, Alexander would be arrested first. I needed a careful plan, one that left no doubt about the true criminal. I couldn't go to the police yet. Nathan had constructed the perfect frame. Every document bore Alexander's name, his social security number, his forged signatures. Without Eleanor's evidence presented correctly, authorities would target the wrong son. First, I needed guidance and professional help. 5 days after discovering the USB drive, I called Rebecca Thompson, one of Eleanor's closest colleagues at the firm. When I explained what I had found, there was a long silence. I knew Eleanor was investigating something serious, Rebecca said finally. Even during chemotherapy, she worked tirelessly. She never shared details, but I could tell it weighed heavily on her. Then softly, "Benjamin, you need the FBI. Eleanor once mentioned a seasoned agent, David Brooks, who specializes in financial crimes against seniors. I'll get you his contact information." The next morning, I called Agent Brooks. His voice was calm, experienced, the sound of someone who had dismantled countless elaborate schemes. I uploaded everything through a secure portal: the victim files, the recordings, Eleanor's detailed notes. All of it. 4 hours later, he called back. "Mr. Gideon, your wife's evidence is exceptionally strong, but for federal prosecution, we need either additional cooperation from the subject or a controlled presentation of the evidence with witnesses. Can you help arrange that?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "I can." But that meant doing something I never imagined: setting a trap for my own son. The next few days, sleep barely came. I sat in Eleanor's office, surrounded by proof of Nathan's crimes, wrestling with how a father could turn against his child. Then I thought about Alexander, ruined by his brother, blamed by his family, punished for crimes he never committed. I thought about Emily, 13 years old now, growing up watching her father struggle while I looked away. I thought about Eleanor using her last strength to protect Alexander while I remained blind. Justice for Eleanor, protection for Alexander, truth for Emily. That was what mattered now. On Friday evening, I sent a message to the family group chat. During the office renovation, I discovered something important that belonged to your mother. It concerns her estate and our family. I need both of you here Saturday at 2 p.m. Alexander replied almost immediately. "Of course. Dad, should I bring Emily? Is everything all right?" Nearly an hour later, Nathan responded, "Dad, I have an important client dinner in Greenwich tomorrow. Can this wait until next weekend?" I wrote firmly, 2 p. Saturday. It's about your mother. Please don't be late. Saturday arrived cold and overcast. I had been awake since dawn, reviewing the evidence one final time. Eleanor's letter lay on the desk beside me, her handwriting still strong despite her weakness near the end. Protect Alexander. At 9 a.m., I called Agent Brooks. Today at 2:00 in Eleanor's office. We'll be in position by 1:30 out of sight. He assured me. When you're ready, simply open the front door. I spent the remaining hours preparing carefully. I dressed in the navy shirt Eleanor always said made my eyes look brighter. At 70, they weren't as bright anymore, but I wore it for her. I placed Eleanor's wedding ring, removed in her final days, on a chain around my neck. It felt like having her with me. At 1:45, I heard the first car in the driveway. My hands were steady. My resolve was unbreakable. Eleanor had spent 3 years gathering evidence while cancer killed her, fighting alone to protect the son I had failed to truly see. The least I could do was be courageous enough to use it. Whatever the cost. They arrived minutes apart. Alexander came first, holding Emily's hand, his 13-year-old daughter's face filled with concern. Then Nathan pulled up in his Porsche, a car worth nearly 3 years of Alexander's teaching salary. I watched from the window as they walked up the driveway together. Alexander moved protectively, one hand on Emily's shoulder. Nathan strode confidently, as if he owned the world. They were both my sons, and one had spent 12 years destroying the other. Inside Eleanor's office, I had arranged everything carefully. Alexander and Emily sat together on the small sofa. Emily pressed close to her father. Nathan took the leather armchair opposite them, settling in comfortably. I stood behind Eleanor's desk, the laptop open, the evidence ready. "Thank you both for coming," I said calmly. "I know this is sudden, but it's necessary." Nathan glanced at his watch. "Dad, I have a flight back to Connecticut this evening. Can we keep this brief? It will take exactly as long as it needs to take," I replied firmly. 11 months ago, your mother passed away. Before she died, she left me a letter about something she discovered and investigated for nearly 3 years while cancer was taking her life." Alexander leaned forward, confused. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about fraud, theft, and identity theft," I said, holding up Eleanor's letter. "Your mother uncovered that 7 elderly clients lost a total of $2.1 million over 12 years, all through investment accounts opened in Alexander's name." The room went completely still. What Alexander whispered, "That's impossible. I know you didn't," I said gently, then turned to Nathan. His expression remained carefully neutral. "But someone did. Someone who used Alexander's name, his social security number, and forged his signatures perfectly. Someone who ensured Alexander would take the blame if it ever came to light." Nathan stood abruptly. "Dad, Mom was on heavy medication toward the end. She wasn't always clear-headed. Whatever she thought she found." "Sit down," I said sharply. "Both of you." The authority in my voice surprised even me. Nathan hesitated, then sat. "Your mother was clear-headed enough to trace bank records, follow money trails, and record multiple conversations. She confronted the person responsible, and she recorded that too." I turned the laptop toward them and pressed play. Eleanor's voice filled the room, calm and controlled. "Nathan, we need to talk about something serious." Nathan's voice followed, smooth and confident. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Margaret Wilson lost $420,000. A long pause. "That's unfortunate," Nathan said coolly. "Market fluctuations happen." "Don't," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "The money moved into accounts under Alexander's name, but you control them." I watched Nathan's face as his own recorded voice played. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted toward the door. "I understand theft," Eleanor continued on the recording. "I understand you've been using your brother's identity for 12 years. Silence. Then Nathan laughed. A cold, empty sound. "So what are you planning to do about it?" he asked. "I'm going to the authorities." "With what evidence?" Nathan replied arrogantly. "Alexander's name is on everything. He'll be arrested long before anyone looks at me." Emily began crying quietly. Alexander sat frozen, staring at the floor. The recording continued. "Those elderly people had more money than they truly needed," Nathan said coldly. "I used it to build a real career. And Alexander, he's always been weak, a disappointment. No one would ever believe him over me. I won." "Mom." Eleanor's soft sobs. Footsteps. A door slamming. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was crushing. Alexander stood slowly, shaking. "My bankruptcy," he whispered. "My credit being destroyed for years. That was you." Nathan remained silent. "Claire left me because she believed I was financially irresponsible." Alexander continued, tears streaming down his face. "I couldn't get a loan when Emily needed surgery. I had to ask parents of my students for help. I thought it was all my fault. Dad, and it was you," Alexander said, voice breaking completely. "You destroyed my marriage, my life, and you let me believe I deserved it." Nathan stood slowly, a faint smirk appearing. So what now? Dad, you're going to turn in your own son over this. Alexander pulled Emily close protectively. Nathan waited, confident that blood loyalty would win. He had never truly understood his mother. Or me. Yes, I said quietly. I am. The words landed like a hammer. Nathan's smirk vanished instantly. Alexander looked up in stunned disbelief. There was no turning back now. Nathan straightened, his tone sharpening. Fine. Yes. I used Alexander's information. But it wasn't personal. Dad, it was just business. Business. I kept my voice steady. You stole from elderly people who trusted you. People who worked their whole lives for that money. Shut up. Alexander, Nathan snapped, turning on his silent brother. Those people had accumulated far more than they needed. I built something substantial with it. I earned millions while you taught history for $58,000 a year. I turned the laptop screen toward them again. 7 victims. Real people with real names. Margaret Wilson, 84. Edward Harris, 82. Dorothy Mitchell, Francis Sullivan. Everyone came to your mother after you disappeared with their retirement savings. I clicked through Eleanor's meticulously organized files. Here are the forged signatures. Your handwriting imitating Alexander's perfectly. Here are the money trails. Accounts in Alexander's name feeding directly into your shell, companies Harborview Capital, Northridge Partners, all controlled by you. Nathan's face hardened. He glanced at the door, calculating escape. You want the full truth, he sneered at Alexander. Every failure you experienced, I caused it. The bankruptcy, me. Credit cards opened in your name, maxed out, never paid. Your score crashed to 465. That's why you couldn't get loans, better jobs, or respect. Alexander trembled visibly. Emily pressed tighter against him. And Claire? Nathan continued with cruel calm. I sent her copies of statements from accounts you didn't even know existed. She thought you were hiding debt and lying to her. I ended your marriage deliberately. Stop, Alexander whispered, voice breaking. I won, Nathan shouted suddenly. You lost your home, your savings, your confidence because I'm simply better. Dad, Emily cried softly. Alexander held her, unable to speak. No, Nathan, I said firmly, you lost. I opened the office door wide. Agent David Brooks stepped in, followed by 2 additional FBI agents. Nathan Gideon, Agent Brooks said evenly. You are under arrest for wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and financial exploitation of elderly victims. Nathan went deathly pale. Dad, you can't do this. I'm your son. An agent placed handcuffs on him. The metallic click echoed in the quiet room. You stopped being my son, I said, my voice finally cracking. When you framed your innocent brother and preyed on vulnerable seniors. When you let us believe Alexander was failing while you systematically destroyed him. Please, Dad. Eleanor's knew the truth. I continued. She spent her final 3 years, while dying of cancer, gathering undeniable proof to protect Alexander. It took her death for me to finally see clearly. Agent Brooks read Nathan his rights as the agents led him out. Nathan shouted empty threats that I no longer heard. The door closed. Silence flooded the room. Grandpa, Emily asked through tears. Where are they taking Uncle Nathan? I knelt down to her level. He hurt many people, sweetheart. Now he has to answer for what he did. Is Dad in trouble? No. Honey, your dad is completely innocent. He always was. I hugged Alexander tightly. He collapsed against me, sobbing like a child. Your mother did this, I whispered. She knew who you really were all along. I was the one who was blind. Later, after the agents and Nathan were gone, I watched the empty street through the window. The FBI vehicles had left. The son I had praised for decades was lost forever. The son I had overlooked was finally free. There was no sense of triumph, only the heavy weight of truth. There was no lengthy trial. 4 weeks after Nathan's arrest, his attorney reached out to Agent Brooks with a plea offer. The evidence was airtight and overwhelming. In exchange for full cooperation, revealing every hidden account and shell company, Nathan accepted 25 years instead of the potential 60+ he faced at trial. I attended the sentencing alone. Alexander offered to come, but I told him this was something I needed to face by myself. Judge Patricia Morgan, a respected federal judge with sharp eyes and decades of experience, reviewed the plea agreement and addressed my son directly. "Mr. Gideon," she said firmly, "you did not simply steal money. You deliberately and systematically ruined your brother's life. You used his identity, his reputation, and his future as cover for your crimes. If this scheme had continued undetected, he would have been prosecuted first. You built your wealth and status on his destruction." Nathan stood silent in prison orange, his expensive suits long gone. "This represents a profound betrayal, not only of your victims but of your own family." The judge continued, "You exploited vulnerable elderly citizens and framed your brother. The law permits leniency through plea agreements. The facts here do not warrant additional mercy." She sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release, and ordered full restitution of $2.1 million. He would serve his time at FCI Otisville, with no parole in the federal system. He would serve at least 21 years. He was 46. He would be 67, if he lived that long. Before release, they led him away. He never once looked at me. 3 months later, restitution was largely completed. Nathan's Greenwich mansion sold for $1.6 million. His vehicles, boat, and hidden investment accounts were seized and liquidated. The government recovered $1.7 million. I contributed $300,000 from Eleanor's life insurance policy. It was what she would have wanted. Checks were distributed to all 7 victims, not complete repayment, but an average of 90% of their losses, for people who believed their life savings were gone forever. It felt like a miracle. Mrs. Wilson received $378,000. When I delivered the news in person, she wept openly. "Because of Eleanor and you," she said, "my grandson can go to college without debt." Alexander's vindication came gradually but surely. The local newspaper in Madison ran a front-page story clearing his name completely. The school district honored him with a Community Integrity Award. Fraud alerts were removed, and his credit history was corrected. Full recovery would take years, but the path was finally open. Community support poured in overwhelmingly. Parents of current and former students organized a fundraiser that raised $55,000 to help him rebuild. Alexander cried when he told me about it. 4 months after sentencing, I sold the house on Elm Street. Too many painful memories, Eleanor dying upstairs, discovering the devastating truth in her office, Nathan being led away in handcuffs. I couldn't remain there. I purchased a comfortable but modest home 15 minutes from Alexander's apartment. 2 weeks later, Alexander and Emily moved in with me. His credit was still healing, he said, but we both knew the deeper truth: we needed each other now. I began volunteering at the local senior center, teaching workshops on recognizing and preventing financial scams. Turning pain into protection felt like continuing Eleanor's mission. before selling the old house. I stood one final time in Eleanor's office. I decided not to convert it into a simple reading room after all. Instead, in our new home, I carefully recreated it. Her desk, her bookshelves, her diplomas on the wall, a living tribute to a woman who battled cancer and corruption simultaneously, who used her final strength to protect the son I had failed to truly see. She protected us even after death through evidence, recordings, and unyielding truth. That was Eleanor's true legacy. Not her degree or career or even our marriage, but her courage to fight for justice, even when it cost her everything, even when it cost her family's illusion of peace. On a quiet January morning, 4 months after Nathan's sentencing, we held a small dedication ceremony in what I now called the Eleanor Memorial Office. I had recreated it with loving care in our new home. East-facing windows caught the gentle winter sunlight, just as they had before. Eleanor's desk sat proudly beneath them, her reading glasses in their case beside her framed law degree. Family photographs lined the shelves our wedding day, the boys as young children, Emily's baby pictures. It wasn't a shrine, it was a living space. Alexander paid bills there. Emily did her homework at Eleanor's desk. Above the desk hung a simple bronze plaque. Eleanor Gideon, 1957, 2024. She fought for truth even when it cost her everything. 5 of us gathered that cold morning: Alexander and Emily, Mrs. Margaret Wilson, who insisted on attending despite the weather, and me. "Grandpa asked me to read something," Emily said, her 13-year-old voice steady despite emotion. She held a printed page. "It's an essay I wrote for school about a person who changed my life." She cleared her throat and began. "My grandmother passed away before I could really know her. I was only 12 when cancer took her. But this year, I learned something incredible about her. While she was dying, she was also fighting. Not just cancer, but serious crime. My uncle did terrible things. He stole savings from elderly people and made it look like my dad was responsible. For 12 years, my dad's life was ruined by lies. He lost his credit, his marriage, and his confidence. But Grandma knew the truth, even while very sick. She spent nearly 3 years investigating quietly. She collected evidence, recorded conversations, and built an unbreakable case. When she died, she left everything for my grandpa to find. Because of her courage, my dad was proven innocent. Because of her, justice was served. Because of her, our family is healing. My grandmother was like a guardian angel who saved my dad even after she was gone. That's the kind of person I want to become. Someone who stands for what's right, no matter how hard it is." Emily folded the paper gently. "Mrs." Wilson wiped tears from her eyes. Alexander hugged his daughter tightly, tears flowing freely. Then Alexander spoke, voice thick with emotion. "Mom," he said, looking at Eleanor's photograph, "thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Thank you for fighting a battle I didn't even know was happening." He turned to me. "Dad, thank you for finishing what Mom started, for choosing truth, for finally choosing me." I couldn't speak. I simply held my son in an embrace 47 years overdue. After Mrs. Wilson left and Emily went downstairs, I stood alone in the office. Winter sunlight cast gentle patterns across Eleanor's desk. People often ask how I found the strength to turn in my own son. The truth is, I didn't. Eleanor did. She fought 2 battles at once, one against cancer, One against corruption. She lost the first, but she won the second, and that victory will endure long after us. Nathan is serving 25 years at FCI Otisville. We do not visit. Some betrayals cut too deeply. Eleanor taught me that real love sometimes means protecting the innocent, even when it costs everything. She didn't just leave evidence. She left truth. And truth has given us back our family, one now built on honesty rather than blind loyalty. Snow fell softly past the windows. Emily's voice called from downstairs. "Grandpa, Dad's making hot chocolate." I took one last look at Eleanor's smiling photograph and went down to join them. 3 generations healing together. "Tell me another story about Grandma," Emily said as I entered the kitchen. I smiled gently. Every story about her is a story about quiet bravery. I'm 70 years old now, and if there's one lesson this true story has taught me, it's this. Don't be blind like I was. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't favor one child over another. Don't wait until someone is gone to recognize their courage. For 47 years, I thought I knew my family completely. God showed me I was wrong. I thought I knew which son deserved my pride. God revealed I had been celebrating the wrong one all along. I thought my wife was simply a dedicated attorney. God opened my eyes. She was a warrior. The grandfather stories I tell Emily now are different from the ones I used to tell. They're honest. They include mistakes, blindness, and lessons learned too late. But they also speak of redemption, of how God can use even our greatest failures to bring truth into the light. This true story taught me that sometimes love requires choosing justice over comfort. That real family is rooted in truth, not unquestioning loyalty. That the people we underestimate, like my son Alexander, like my dying wife, are often the ones carrying the greatest strength. If you're living through something similar right now, if you sense something is wrong, but fear looking closer, don't wait as long as I did. God provides courage when we need it most, but we must be willing to accept it. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what is right? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment, and if these grandfather stories touched you, please subscribe and share this true story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the hardest truths are the very ones that set us free. God bless you all.